better than that. Come on, from the front, entire front.
Is that how you teach voice?
No, but I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. That's the first time I think we've done a Mexican wave in here. Yay! There's always a start, isn't there? Who's that up the top beating that person up there? Who is it? Leave him alone. It has to be an NA, doesn't it?
Should we start?
Yes!
Okay. Fantastic! Hi everyone! So great to see so many of you here. Thank you so much for coming. We're delighted to have Didi Hopkins with us this evening to talk to us about her work and her practice and the things that she cares about. So, yeah, go for it, go for it! I will just briefly say that Didi is a Commedia dell'arte expert and she's worked with the National Theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Company, she's directed, she's been a movement director, she's an actor. She's worked with women, she's established a feminist company, which she will be talking to you about today, and she's working to promote leadership, and especially leadership in, with women. So I think I know most of you. If you don't know me, my name is Irini Kartsaki. I'm a lecturer here. I've been here for a year and a half, and I have started organizing this series of events, and it's called A Call to Act, which is not just about acting, it's also about the political understanding of acting to make our lives better. So this is the first event in Loudon, and there will be other events this year and next year as well. It's for all of you, it's open to the public, to other audiences, but I think it's really, really important that you benefit from that. And for that reason, what we've done is we will have a discussion. So Salvatore Sorge is in discussion with Didi, and then we will open up to the audience for any kind of questions that you might have, okay? So we really want to facilitate a discussion between you and Didi Hopkins this evening. And I would like to ask you to consider what you might want to ask or find out about. And this can be quite personal for you, for your journey, for your creative practice, but it might be more generally about the industry or anything else you might want to find out about, okay? So, can I please ask you to please welcome Didi Hopkins.
So, my God. I want to ask you so many questions, and I want to.
How long have we got?
Oh, we're going to be here for about half an hour to us chatting, and then open it up to them. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you when Irini actually mentioned inviting artists in, one of the reasons why I wanted to meet you was, firstly, commedia is something that's really, I'm passionate about because it's from my culture, Italian, so I'm quite proud of that. Secondly, you were so formative for me when I was teaching. In 2012, I was teaching in the secondary school side of arts ed, and there was a commedia project that came in, and though I had a passion about it, I didn't know the first thing about how to teach it, and so I was teaching year 7s. So yes, little Diddies, who had no clue about any of this. So what I did at that time, I was just researching, and then I put commedia in old YouTube, and you popped up with several videos. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I'm so thankful that I saw those videos because it made so much more sense. Instead of reading it from a book, actually seeing someone embody the work and make the work alive and fun, which is what these year 7s needed to do. This is not just for year 7s though. So I'd like to find out about why your journey and how you got into it.
How I got into commedia. Well, actually I started life as a classical musician, and so I came across theatre quite late in terms of being a student, and I thought I was going to be a professional musician.
So when I joined the theatre department at Dartington, I was crap for 3 years. I knew absolutely nothing. I was really terrible, no talent. Just thinking, why am I here? Why am I here? And then 3 of the students that I was at Dartington with, we went to Amsterdam to live for a year to see if our training actually was a transferable skill in theatre. Could we actually make money from creating theatre? And we did for a year, actually. And I met there a company called Spider Women, who were an all-female company from America, and that started by 3 sisters, 3 Navajo Indian sisters. And they were just fantastically sort of vibrant. And I started to realise, as a woman, that I wasn't really enjoying the theatre around me or what I was seeing. So the Commedia came as a result of doing my first show with Beryl and the Perils. If you're English, you know who Beryl and the Peril is, do you? If you're from the UK? Oh, God almighty.
They're so young. They're so young.
Did you read the Topper or the Beezer or the Dandy or the Beano?
Yes?
That
Beano. Well,
what's so interesting is that Beryl the Peril was in the Topper. She got her own annual. But she wasn't as well known as Dennis the Menace. So I am getting to how I discovered Commedia, really. So I came back from Amsterdam and co-founded this company, which ended up being called Beryl and the Perils, because it's very cartoon-like. And the thing about Beryl and the Peril is that she has a great idea every week to really subvert patriarchy, to go against her dad, and to do things that good girls, weren't really meant to do. And she knows she's going to get into trouble. And at the end of the cartoon strip, every week, she gets put over her dad's lap and she gets whacked with a slipper, but she's looking at the audience going, yeah, but it was worth it. So we called our company Beryl and the Perils, and we did a show about sex and violence, and we thought we'd last for 3 nights. Well, actually sex, not violence really, but sex. Because it was a taboo subject on stage, and we mentioned parts of our bodies that were not usually mentioned on stage at that time, before you were born. We thought we'd last 3 nights, and we lasted 6 or 8 years, which is just terrific. And what it was about was we'd brought our own stories, and we thought they were really crap. These stories are really crap. Nobody's going to want to know about our first sexual encounter on stage. And of course the audience, and we did a little bit of documentary and sort of like Brecht, but it was basically cartoon style. And we mixed it with real facts. So we mixed it with, the true stories of a judge and what he'd say to a girl who is, accusing somebody of being raped. And I have to say that those statistics haven't changed in 40 years. You go, really? Things haven't changed. So we did this mixture of our stories and real stories, and at the end, when we thought it would last 3 nights, people kept coming up to us going, oh, that's my story. Oh, it's like that for me. Oh my God. Oh, I felt that too. Oh, that happened to me. Oh. And what we realised immediately was that our stories mattered, and they weren't written by, Chekhov or Harold Pinter or mainly male playwrights at the time. There was nothing that represented our lives. So we put that on stage, and it was just extraordinary and wonderful. And later, I'm not selling these, but somebody turned our stories into Beryl the Peril comic, the feminist version, and these were our programmes at Edinburgh. So through that we became very popular, because it was popular theatre. We played in battered wives' refuges, which is like, so there you are, and this is the performance, and these are the wives and the children of the battered wives. And then we played in bingo places down in Essex, where the women would say, oh look, she's got her Wellington boots on the wrong feet. Oh look what she's doing now, And we played at the Royal Court as well. So this it was very popular, which meant it was across class. And having done this first show, I went, this is great. Now what? Maybe there's no life. And then I saw a workshop. in Tufnell Park with 2 Italians. And it was commedia dell'arte, and I didn't really know what it was. I got there in the end. I promise you, it won't all be quite.
No. This is really interesting. This is really interesting.
I won't go on the M25 any further. So then I met these 2 Italians, and it was like drugs and sex, all in theatre, and I just thought, phooey. This is amazing. And what was amazing is that the way that Carlo Boso, who was the teacher, taught me, he didn't speak English, so he did it in a mixture of French and Italian, so you couldn't understand anything. So it was all what you felt, and everything was shown in the body. So, you know, you could only copy. And then if he was directing me, he'd go, do it. And I'd go, and he'd go, that's it. And I'd go, but what do you mean, that's it? And what I found really fascinating is that kind of directing meant that the actor would copy it, and then they had to find their own way to it. Because the muscles meant that they'd done it, and then they had to make it their own. It's not like copycat theatre. And so he just had this way of teaching and this belief that commedia was popular, and that it should be regional, and it should not be in West End theatres, and it was of the people. And so I got hooked. It was just like sex, drugs and rock and roll. It was like a fire, and everything I do and have done since is still commedia. So, you know, when Irini was saying I go and I work in business, I only take commedia into business. They don't know it. They don't know. So that's how I discovered commedia, and we spent half of our time learning commedia and the other half of the time making masks out of clay, and then out of wood, and then leather, which is the tradition, the way it goes. And I just couldn't get enough, so I was asked to go to Avignon Festival and did commedia for 6 weeks there.
The Avignon Festival?
The Avignon Festival, yeah. So sorry, I got there.
No, go on.
Then I'm there. That's how I discovered it.
Okay, so... But look, I totally get the whole drugs aspect of it in terms of... Because it's incredibly liberating. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen people who... I worked recently, maybe a couple of years ago. Do you know Elliot Ross, I think it is? I think he's one of your people.
He is.
Yes. I worked with him because I teach at other places as well. And he came in and did a workshop. And I watched people who were quite, oh no, I don't really... suddenly put on a mask and suddenly go, way!
Yeah.
And it was really fun, and it was incredibly playful, inventive, no set guidelines, not really like, you know, you had an outline, but you could play within that outline. So I kind of guess we need to just step back a little bit and just talk about why commedia came about, and where, we know it started in Italy, but why it all came about.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know exactly why it came about, except that it was at the time of the Renaissance, and the Renaissance is rebirth. So what was happening at the time is Michelangelo and, you know, all sorts of great people, Leonardo da Vinci, were kind of pushing the boundaries of life, the universe and everything, which had been, I go to church, I pray, I thank God for the apple that I eat, and I do exactly as I'm told, and I put money in the box. Because most of Italy and a lot of Northern Europe was, you know, it was run by the church. And suddenly, and how suddenly, we don't know, you know, that masks will have come from ancient Greeks to the Romans, and then there's mask traditions all over the world. But somehow, in the 1500s, the first company declared themselves in Padua, in Italy, and they signed a contract, and you know, kind of commedia was born, and it was very subversive. It was improvised. It took ideas of the Renaissance around, so it gave people the opportunity to go, hang on a minute, I'm like that, or my boss is like that, or, you know, to suddenly start to see themselves and almost have opinions. Whereas when you get mummers plays or You know, when you think about anything that happens in church, you just do as you're told. You know, you obey. And this was a disruptor and a provoker, because people had suddenly to go, oh, I don't know that. Oh, I don't know about that. Oh, look what she's just done. Oh, blimey, O'Reilly. And it was like a soap opera on stage, because it wasn't like Hamlet and everybody that revolves around Hamlet. Everybody's story had a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it was revolutionary in that way. And at the time, I'm still answering the question.
Yeah.
You're very passionate.
Passion's never a thing to be excused.
Okay. Well, the thing about the first contract, and then 6 other companies were formed, is that it was a contract. It's a very democratic thing to do, is to actually write a contract. Men and women were in the contract. Men and women got paid the same. Just like you to remember in 2020 that in 1547, men and women in the commedia companies got paid the same.
Can I just add in there, because we were just talking earlier on today, Irene and I were talking about how in Shakespeare, which was going on at the same time in the UK, only men were allowed on stage, no women. So that's
they weren't, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's evolved out of that is that Shakespeare is a playwright, and Commedia dell'arte is actually a tradition. But it's a tradition that unlocks human behaviour and types, the different types of people that you might meet. So for an actor, it's actually the biggest training, I think. I think it's the training where you bring yourself, you discover yourself, you explore yourself through the, you know, not the limitations, but the kind of the liberation, like you said, of the mask. Because you have to be big in order, you have to bring everything of yourself before you put this on. So the training, you know, and if I'm doing 2 weeks training here, for example, you know, with one of the courses, we won't touch the masks for 3 days, because, well, we might, but because there's so much else to do, which is actually discovering, you know, where do your emotions sit? Where does your breath sit? What happens as a theatre maker when you understand the power of your choices on an audience, because in Commedia you have to be the actor, the editor, and the audience. You've got to see that whole thing. And what does it mean to tap into 1 and 1 is 3? You know, you're the audience, I'm the actor. What's the 3? That's the creativity and imagination. And in Commedia, you know, it's so rhythmic and it's so physical that as an audience you soon see when you get bored, which is quite an interesting thing for theatre makers, because you just know that's over, it's finished. And how often do you go to the theatre and go, I know what's going to happen next? And the whole thing about Commedia is that you shouldn't know. You should not know what's going to happen next, because it's so exciting.
And that's one of the elements that I find personally quite interesting and quite scary, in fact, is sharing what's going on, directly going out to the audience and then coming back to the partner on stage. Was there anything you wanted to add on that?
Loads.
Oh, go on.
What do I want to add on that? It is scary, and I've done a lot of work with actors at the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Theatre who haven't done this kind of training. They're actors. And so we're doing like a restoration comedy or, you know, something like that, which involves this. Involves, oh, you know, and I'm going to town with my maid, and then I'm going to go and have it off with my butler. Know what I mean? That sort of thing. And they're not very comfortable about that. They say things like, some actors say, well, what's my intention here? And you say, your intention is to entertain, you know, which is what one aspect of really clocking an audience. And the other thing that some real actors do is they look at the audience like this. They don't see them. They don't see them and take that information, because the act of theatre is community. And whatever happens in this room, you know, with the people on stage, it's the only time it happens. It's not got a fourth wall. So it is scary, but it's points up. It points up human behaviour.
Mm.
Because a mask might say, you know, and then it's going to go, now look what I'm going to do, just with a look. And then it'll go and do it. And then it'll go, see what I did. Because this mask wants you to love it more than this mask wants you to love it. But this mask wants you to love it more than it wants you to love this mask. So they're vying for your attention. Because it's a game. You know, it's a game. First of all, you know that these are masks. We don't pretend they're not masks. So already it's a game. And some of the people on stage are unmasked, the women, because they're so beautiful. So the whole thing about looking at the audience, and when you get to Brecht, of course, looking at an audience is about decision making. It's about, you know, Grusha's going to pick up the baby. So Grusha, do you know that play? Anyway, there's a play by Bertolt Brecht, and there's a baby. And this girl says, am I going to pick it up or not? And instead of just going in the script, picks up the baby and walks on, she goes, and she looks at the audience, and in that moment, she's going, what would you do? What should I do? And so she wants you to understand what she's doing. And it's the same in Commedia. It's the same.
I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about the subversiveness of Commedia. It extended so far into the language that was being used. And you've just kind of previewed it very, very sneakily in there, which is great. Can you tell us a little bit about the language of Commedia?
Yes. So originally, all of the different characters came from different parts of Italy, and they had very strong regional dialects. So they basically spoke different languages. And the people in Padua will have had a very different language to the people in Venice, which is where people say Commedia was born, and different in Bologna. It's a little bit like, you know, East 15 is an international school now, and everybody has their own language and accent that they bring with them, and there's no, you know, we don't worry about received pronunciation in the same way.
It's a tool. It's an accent.
It's a tool.
Yes.
It's a tool, but it's not the only.
Absolutely, it's not the only.
It's not the only.
It's not the default. We use it as any accent is a tool to get a job.
Yeah.
See that bit of Commedia there?
You did look very good looking.
Yeah.
So what happened as Commedia moved and travelled, and all of these different, let's call them dialects, came in, is that not everybody understood everything. So they started to use, and especially because they were excommunicated from, you know, they weren't really allowed, certainly they weren't allowed to be buried within consecrated ground within a town because they were subversives. And so they also had to be very clever with their language because they didn't want the church and the censors to go, hang on a minute, you're not allowed to talk about that then, are you? You can't talk about blood, because it's not allowed. So, you know, because people could stop their performances at any time, or try to. So they got round it by inventing words or doing sound-alike. And the word that has sort of the general word that it's become known as is gromelot, which means a lot of gromming. Yeah, I know the time they got it, I wore some of the gin. Really, I couldn't really. I've never in my life put a wine. How about no. But, well, I've got a nice lot. Oh, I find you in it, because I need to find you. Who's right on the finish, is when you got in it, because you're on the So, you know, gromelot, you know, when you start playing with gromelot, there are lots of different people who teach it in different ways, but it's, some people get you to learn 10 Russian words and then listen to Russian speaking and copy them and drop the words in, because it's all about sort of just growing the pool of sound alike. And I used to be really good at it. I'm really crap at it now because I don't practice enough, except I do it at home a lot, and luckily my daughter knows exactly what I'm saying, because when I get very old, I'll probably only talk. But the reason that I find it so useful is that it's a tool. It's a tool to get a sound of a shape of a character. And it might be that the shape and the sound, that the sound fits the shape. Or you do the opposite and you make the sound. So, if I'm that sound is better with that sort of shape than there's a little bit of a sort of, it doesn't quite fit. So what you're looking for is shape and sound. Because when you go out into the world, these people are all over the place. Absolutely everywhere. You go to Sainsbury's, they're there. They're absolutely at Sainsbury's. So the Gromelot is a way of being free in improvisation. And Keith Johnson, in his book on improvisation, talks about an improvisation he does where, that a couple are having an argument, a domestic argument. Well, I did a workshop with him a few years ago, and the situation was that we have an argument, he's left, I'm left in the flat, he's coming to ask for his things back. So you start off in Gromelot, and then English, Gromelot, English, Gromelot. And I mean the sound and the rhythm and the, because it frees your brain, it doesn't have to make sense. God almighty, how much time do you spend in improvisation going, I'm going to just make this make sense now. And your whole body goes rigid because you're so concentrated on your brain. So it's a freer, it's a liberator, and I think it helps people access emotions as well.
So are you trying to, by using Gromelot, actually use it to clarify your intention?
Could.
I mean, is that one way of using it? I'm not trying to mould the question in that direction. I'm just curious myself because I know that sometimes when, like for example, when I went to drama school, one of the things that they gave us to do was you come in with your speech, and I remember one of my teachers eventually asking me to do the whole speech in complete gobbledygook. He wanted to see if I could still maintain the intention behind what I wanted to achieve. Now, I don't know. Is that what Gromelot's about?
I think that is one aspect of it.
Right. Okay.
I think if you take the words out of Molière and you just look at the structure and the emotions, that's the basis on which the language. That's the kind of structure on which the language should sit. And I was working with some kids, sixth formers, who were having to do Molière for their A-level, which was not going down very well. So we took out all the words and we did entrances and exits with little bits of speech through Gromelot. And I didn't tell them that it was exactly the same as the scene. And then, having done that successfully with, I'd say be angry. I mean, when you talk about actions and intentions, there's what you bring, your emotion, and then there's the intention, like, the sort of Max Stafford Clark's sense of actions or something. All of that is part of commedia, but by going through this, and then putting the words in, Father, you didn't tell me that I was going to have to marry the man next door who's so ugly and old and ghastly. Although Molière's a bit fluffier with his, he's got more ornate language. Yes, the father says, yes, and not only will you marry him, but he's going to give me £300 because I can't bear you being in my house any longer. If you just did those words, oh, Daddy, oh, I don't want to marry the man next door. You're trying for the emotions, but they're in the head, they're not in the body.
Yeah.
And that's where we live, isn't it? Here and here and the solar plexus. My job in Gromelot is to move you, or in language, isn't it? So that just is an access, it's a way of accessing what's in you without you going, that's not good enough.
because I've got quite an intense interest in the Grummelot because I'm curious about the gobbledygook. I really enjoy it, and the sound alike. I've never heard that word be used before in the context of Grummelot, so that's really interesting to just go sound alike. And you're probably, what you just did a moment ago is probably the closest I've heard to an English sounding Grummelot, or I could discern English words in there. So I'm curious about how to make it sound safe, but what I'm more curious about now is actually what you just said a moment ago about the voice turns to the shape and fit of the mask. So I guess that kind of, I mean, there's so many, but a kind of an overview of mask, and then actually how that moves us physically and how that brings out the sound of the voice as well.
Well, the interesting thing for me about Commedia to do with voice is that every character is got two parts to it, an animal part and a human part, every mask and every non-mask. And every character leads with a different part of the body. And so, you know, if I'm hot, I'm looking for the sound, or I'm looking for the sound that fits. It'll be different for each of you, but it's with that same intention that we're talking about. But the intention is in action. The intention isn't here. So that all of those characters will have a different voice, depending on what you do with the body. And that's a different rhythm, too. Because you can't go, oh, it's very nice to see you today. Because it doesn't fit. So it's constantly looking for how you fit in your own body, and you know what more of yourself you can bring without the brain, because you don't need it. We don't need to rely on it in terms of creativity, because you've got everything. And yet you go to script and you probably don't read the stage directions, you read the words. And the stage directions are the thing that give us the information. You know, when you look at Brecht, I mean, 50% of his words are stage directions, or 30%. So there's just something about the body and the way that the voice has to fit the shape, and you have to discover it. Did I answer that?
You mentioned about the male characters, and you said about the female, some of them female characters being unmasked. I'm just curious, because is Columbina masked? Am I right on that? She's not masked. So, but there's something about the female characters in Commedia that, instead of being what is perceived as the, shall we say, the passive role that sometimes we find in English theatre, they're not like that at all. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
So if you think traditionally Commedia is about masters and servants, about masters and servants and lovers. So the first dynamic is the master and the servant. It's the boss and the worker. It's the boss and the worker here. It's the boss and the worker, you know, who runs this East 15, or who runs Sainsbury's, or who, you know, Boris Johnson, or anybody, you know. There's the boss, or Dominic Cummings is higher than Boris Johnson. And the worker, you need that, because somebody has to go to work and get paid, and somebody has to have the bright ideas to run the country. Then you need the woman. And the woman at that moment is the third dynamic, and she can move, she's every woman. So this woman, the female between Boris and the worker, is a woman who either moves up for money or down for sex. You know, she's got everything. She knows everything. So the Columbina is unmasked, because all of the women were unmasked because they were already, that was the thing. You go to the theatre, you know, it happened in a piazza, it was an open air theatre. You go because there are women on stage, and they're gorgeous, and they have different, you know, there's the female lover, there's the Columbina, there's the older woman, the witch, which we might talk about, and they are as intelligent and bright, and they're just equal. It's quite extraordinary, really, isn't it? I think.
It's
so that was really badly answered.
No, it's not at all.
Could you just ask us again, please?
I'm dyslexic, so I'm forgetting.
The women. You were just
the women, yes. The importance, the assertiveness of the women.
Yes. Well, I mean, the women can. So the men are like, and particularly the masks, they're like ladders. You know, the boom, 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 boom. There's a sort of ladder, and the women are like snakes, and they know how to go around all of them, so they can play up or down or around. But they are very assertive. Well, you know, feminists, because you know the young girl who might be the daughter of Pantalone, you know, wants to marry Silvio. That's equal, you know, like in this room, there are people of equal age, and you know, you probably, some of you, will end up marrying people of a similar age. But in commedia, traditionally, Pantalone wants her to marry an older man, or an older man wants to marry her. And there's a disrupted order of natural things, because if you think of, you know that girl Nicole, who married the 80-year-old...
Oh, Anna Nicole Smith.
Anna Nicole Smith,
yeah.
You know, and then inherited all of his money. She was 22 and he was 80, and she was sort of, you know, she knew what she was doing. But the assertiveness comes from women standing up to the men and going, I'm not going to do that. Or the maid going, I don't know what you think, but this looks like crap to me. You know, I mean, would you work for a man like that? You know, and that one of the Columbina's functions, because she works from the stomach, is to be every woman and to be one of you, to be part of the audience and to say, the others can't do that. But because the women have no mask and the men have masks, you've got that other thing that goes on, which is this, you know, normal face, playing with this as if it was a normal face, and the whole kind of, the whole sort of balance of what you're watching moves from ordinary to exaggerated in one fell swoop. And the women can tell the truth. And the old women, the witch now, and the any of the older women in Shakespeare or the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, they tell the truth. And in fact, the witch and the guy at the top of the commedia tree, I don't know if you've seen some videos that I made with the mask maker, but what we did over a period of working and teaching together was we'd teach students like you, and we'd teach teachers, and I'd go, we must find a system to introduce the world of commedia, because it was all like just sort of chaos. We'd do a master and a servant and a this and a that, and Ninian, who's this mask maker, went away and smoked a lot of dope and started researching commedia even more with what was going on in Venice at the time and the Kabbalah. And he came up with this system which really positions these rather beautifully, and I might do it in a minute. But Magnifico, who is the top, so that's, you know, right up at the top of, this is the highest of the high, it's kind of God. And the witch, who's underneath him, and she's sort of placed in the heart, they're actually very similar. And he says that Magnifico is king of the city, so the Doge of Venice, or Dominic Cummings, or the Queen, but everything to do with cities and finance and everything that you need to do with commerce, everything. City. But she is queen of the countryside, so she knows everything that is natural, whether it's homeopathy or just, you know, how to look after a sprained finger. You know, that everything else she knows, and they're very similar. So although he comes higher up, she, as a mask, the only female mask, very assertive, powerful, older woman, wise.
Because my interest in that particular mask is because we do commedia projects in the second year. That's traditionally with the BA program, and in the first year with the CTs. One of the things that I always miss, and which I saw from your videos, which are on YouTube, feel free to go have a look, because it's all there. So we don't really need to go over the absolute finer detail of it. There's no need.
We repeat ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Go have a look at the videos. They're there, and they're not very long at all. One of the ones that I felt was missing, because I just found something really earthy and huge about her movement, this whole figure of eight movement that she's got going on for her, was the witch. And, you know, we seem to pair off lovers, older lovers, younger lovers, Zanny, and all that, you know, the stock. But that one, I don't know, it just kind of rubs me a little bit and going, why isn't she spoken about, or why isn't she used as much?
Well, she wasn't. This is a. This mask came about last century because the people who put Commedia back together, like Dario Fo and Jacques Lecoq and Giorgio Strehla in Milan in sort of 1947, they were going, hang on, this old theatre doesn't work anymore, and you know, Meyerhold and Edward Gordon Craig, they'd all been researching and using Commedia and masks and breaking away like Brecht did from this sort of, you know, let's have a cup of tea, kind of theatre. Really terrible things were happening. And the mask came out of this research and the desire to find a female mask. Because there are some other female masks now, which I won't use, because they're the same as the male, but they've got leather eyelashes on.
Really?
And they look very strange. I think what they do is they make the mask look gimmicky. And these masks, to me, don't look gimmicky. There's enough movement in the mask for you to have all of the things, all of the everything going on. Whereas some masks come with a sort of fixed expression already. But so this mask was last century and a very necessary addition to the canon. But there are companies now of women who wear, I mean, I don't discriminate between boys and girls, men and women. We all wear the mask because we've all got a bit of each of these in us. And that's what's so interesting about acting and that sense of people being typecast in the end. Because you get typecast as, you know, like the really stupid one. You know, and that person goes from program to program or, you know, play to play. You know, got quite a good reputation as the stupid one. Whereas somebody else gets a reputation of being very dapper.
So were actors able to switch between the different characters, or were they set stock characters?
No, they mainly played the one character because
Right.
the mask maker will have made the mask to
Fit the
suit
face.
the face
Wow.
of the person and to fit completely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about we were having a little bit of a discussion earlier on about how many story plots there were, because Commedia was largely improvised with a general outline, but you mentioned how many?
Yeah, there's a record, well, there's Goldoni, that's one, who wrote The Servant of Two Masters, which became One Man, Two Governors, and he was invited by a friend of his to go and record what he saw in the improvised performance. And he took it away and he tidied it up, and then he lived on the profits for many years, whilst then continuing to do theatre without masks, because he wanted it to be more psychological. So there you go. But there's what's it called? There's a book of 256 plots, and they are beautifully set out. And there's the way they're set out is you get kind of the kind of overview and then the program notes, and then you get scene one, in which this happens. Pantalone walks along the road and he's very angry with his daughter because she wants to run away with Silvio. His servant is following, and the servant is, you know, making fun of him because he's such a silly old goat. Suddenly they meet the captain, and Pantalone gets a great idea. So that's the script.
There's
That's
no
it.
words
There's
written
no
out.
words. You just get literally the architecture and the plot line. How you get there then is the playing. And you don't know what the other person's going to do. I mean, it's sophisticated. You've rehearsed a little bit, and you know the bits that you're going towards, but you've got to be ready and not locked down, but ready enough to respond to what happens. It's Flaminia Scala is the name of the guy who recorded these different scenarios. And if you look at them and read them, you will find The Tempest, you will find Romeo and Juliet, you will find Twelfth Night, you will find The Comedy of Errors, you'll find a whole load of plots that Shakespeare then wrote. And you think, how interesting.
I'm very aware of our time, and we actually have been. Yes, so.
Yes, 40 minutes.
Yeah,
so
we've been.
Perfect.
Yeah, this is. I mean, it's been great because I actually feel we could go longer. However, I want to give the opportunity for the students to come and ask questions and open it up to the forum for the students.
Try and turn on the light again.
Yay! Thank God we could
It was
actually see the
playing up a
students.
little. Let's see
Yeah.
if it works now. So we have a little bit more
It'll take a little bit
Okay.
of time, but it will
So
come up.
any questions that you have, you can ask, and we'll try to cover as much as possible. So I can't see you at the back.
And I'll answer very, very quickly.
We have 40 minutes.
A quick run through of the masks in Commedia dell'arte.
A quick run through. Magnifico, first actress, first actor, the witch. See how they go down the body?
Yeah.
The doctor, Pantalone, like Steptoe, Fagin or Scrooge.
Yeah.
And the most amazing thing is when you put the mask on, you put the shape of this in the body, you say to people, well, how do you feel? I go, tight. Horrible. And so that's, they're the masters, and then Columbina. Open to you. Alechino, cheeky servant. Brigella, cunning servant. The captain. And Zani. And you know, that's Zani's mask.
I think this deserves a big round of applause.
That was very quick.
Yes, friends, yes.
I was when you were talking about the masculine god mask and the feminine witch god mask. I thought of this question, and I'm very curious to hear your perspective on it as both an artist and a feminist. When you think of all these masks and they're portraying masculinity and femininity in different manifestations, do you see masculinity and femininity as like core aspects of what it means to be human, or do you see it more as like a product of the patriarchy or something like that?
I kind of love you, Reds. I knew you were going to ask a question like that.
Well, you see, if this is the lawmaker, then that's my role at home. I have to, with my family, I have to be able to, you know, see exactly what's going on and make the rules. I also have to be able to pick up the dirty socks. I also have to be, in any of those shapes that I did, there's a different sort of attitude towards things, and I have to be able to be all of those. So I think, in terms of masculine and feminine, that they already started to break boundaries that hadn't been broken before, and men and women have as much right to own the elements of these masks and to discover them, because it's a, you know, not only are they a great tool for performance, but they're a tool for actors to develop and discover things that text cannot bring out of you. So, you know, for you to just know what it means to be slightly mean, or if it's the emotions, you know, I think I have to say it's universal, and I don't see any difference in what happens from the inside. And commedia happens from the inside, and then it comes out.
Then, can I ask a follow-up?
Go on.
How do you then conceptualize what masculinity and femininity are?
Not yet, but I'll let you know tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email. No, but have you?
I like that.
But it's a very, I mean, it's, you know, this whole thing of masculine and feminine, and you know, the way that this started and how we we do it now, or who we are, and who we are in 2020, and why we make theatre, and what the point, and what do you want to say if you're making theatre. All of that must come into it. And all I can say about Commedia is that any elephants in the room have to be put on stage. So anything that is not spoken about, because you don't know if I should bring that to the stage. You know, I mean, you bring it. You know, in Beryl and the Perils, we sang songs about masturbation, menstruation, and nothing could be finer than a peachy ripe vagina. Sorry, but you know.
Oh no, don't apologise.
And that, you know, that 40 years ago was radical. It was really radical. So I think, you know, all of that has to be in the room. There's no hiding in Commedia. It's no curtains to hide behind. That's why it's such an extraordinary tool, because it's not set in the past. It's here and now. Well, that's the kind of theatre you have to make with it.
It's here and now, and I think just want to add on to that a little bit, Rens. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we look at the different qualities when we're teaching voice. The male, the low female, the high male, the high female. Just mixing those qualities, and you can see this week actually when we did mix those qualities, the shimmer, that fluidity that moves through the voice, which actually gives it a whole picture rather than just something that's quite limited. Yeah? Otherwise, all we're doing is working with stereotypes, then, aren't we? Yeah?
And I think, because this, I think, connects to some of the work we've done together in terms of gender, we use femininity and masculinity as tools, right, in practice, to consider embodiment and voice and so on, but in our lives, we don't have necessarily to restrict ourselves in a binary, right? So we can think about the spectrum of gender identity and sexuality and so on. So of course there can be tools, but then when you step out of the theatre and you think about your life experience, then you can think beyond those terms as well, I think. Which might be interesting to do. There was another question.
Can I also just add one tiny
Yes.
thing on that? Because you know, this is where pantomime comes from.
Yeah.
And pantomime is actually all about cross-dressing
Yeah.
and girls playing boys and not pretending to be boys, or the other way around. And you just think, God, there's so much here, and it's untapped still. And England, Great Britain, the UK, crap at understanding or even wanting Commedia. They love pantomime. So, you know, the job really is to make pantomime three-dimensional, not, oh, you are naughty, you're just so naughty, but, oh, you are so naughty. You know, to bring the tragedy of Shakespeare to Commedia, suddenly you've got something that really matters. So,
Absolutely. Natasha?
Yeah, are there new characters being formed? Like, is it an evolving art? And when do you establish when a new character has been formed?
that's a very good question, and I don't think there are anymore, but people keep saying there must be. But the more you work with these and the more you look around you at the types, there are variations. You know, these are 13 people, but there are about 400 different types of Zani, of the servant. But they're types, and they're just really good at codifying the way that people interrelate, given their hierarchical structure of the society within which we live. That's the exterior. And then there's the interior. So I haven't found any new characters that are not a little bit of something we've already got, and I'm still waiting.
Sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah,
Go for it.
what's just the most recent one? Is it The Witch that has been established? That's the most recent.
Yeah, well, no, actually, the one that's been that's the most recent one, and people are looking for other kind of types. Like, this is not a particular commedia dell'arte character; it's Mephistopheles, and this is a bit of a Zani, but he's got quite a big forehead. So he had a brain, but it's not there. He's based on the Hunchback of Notre Dame, so you know that might be a new character, but we use him as a Zani. Could it fit? because we don't need to do the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but that was for a company that did that as a commedia show, and that was Hunchback.
Who decides like when there's, because it's such a big
God. Nobody decides. I mean, it's an oral tradition. Everybody does it in a slightly different way. There are some very basic kind of fundamental things that go alongside the tradition. One is it's improvised. One is that it's half masks. One is that there are women in it. There are some very basic things, but then everybody does it in their own way. One of the newest masks is exactly the same as, for example, that one, but with the eyelashes on. So then men don't play it. And you go, well, hang on a minute. That just goes against everything that I think it's about, which is that anybody can do it. You put eyelashes on it and you give it to a woman. That seems to be really and wrong. Anyway, yes.
You were talking earlier about community in theatre, and I just wondered whether you think, how do you make a theatrical piece more communal, and do you think it's changed over time? Have we become more or less communal in the way we explore theatre?
I think it's community.
Right.
Communal means that we're here together. So I think that we're very good at going to the theatre and not. We're very good at fourth wall theatre. Audiences are very good at fourth wall theatre. When you see One Man, Two Governors, for example, I don't know if you've read it or seen it, but there's a bit in it where he asks the audience for a sandwich, and it turns out to be a hummus sandwich. And what that does, because the audience don't know that it's in the script every night. Sorry, spoiler alert. Or the bit where the woman gets on fire and everything. The audience are led to believe, oh my God, it's in the moment, it's in the moment, it's oh my God, and the audience are like that. They're in the middle of the theatre, they go, oh my God. And Richard Bean, who wrote it, said he's never written anything where at the interval the people are not going, I like what happened in Act 1, but in Act 2, I'm not quite sure. They're going out in the interval and going, did you see that woman? Oh my God, it was just so terrible, I thought it was real, did you think it was real? What about, they're talking about the things that happen. So the community bit of it is that you have to make it something that people will remember, otherwise why are they there? And you have to take them and transport them beyond to, did that happen? So they've got something that as a community event that they then go home and talk about or wonder about. So I don't know if that kind of...
No,
that's good.
Georgia?
This seems like a silly question now, but I was wondering why some of the masks are particularly phallic.
There's only one
Yeah.
that's particularly phallic, and that is the captain.
And that's because he walks from the pelvis.
Because he walks from here, and he's sort of medallion man. He thinks he's God's gift to woman, or he'd like to be. There's another captain, which I haven't got out, but he's not phallic. But this is just one of Ninian's masks that he wanted to make like this to just highlight. I mean, when do you see a penis on stage and don't talk about it? Because that is going to make an audience go. And watch. And when you're thinking about capturing an audience, you have to play to make them stay, to make them pay. You have to play to make them stay. Because you only send a hat round. So how do you get your equal pay? So not all of them are phallic like that. He's a type.
I'm just seeing that for the first time.
Your name?
Veko.
Veko.
Big.
So, it's a bit of a scramble in my head, so...
It's not the only one.
About the elephant in the room and your work that you started in Amsterdam that kind of carried out and grew more than you were expecting. Where do you feel, as a teacher and as a performer, two separate things, how do you feel about where has that kind of encouragement and inspiration come from for that kind of work to be put out, those elephants in the room, where does that encouragement come from now and then in your time in Amsterdam when you started off this?
So in my practice, it wasn't easy to bring the elephant out of, into the room. But what have you got to lose? And in the work that I do with people in business now, I bring the elephants into the room, everything that they're scared of talking about. Because, if we're not calling ourselves to account, and if we're not calling the people who run big businesses to account, and if they're not calling each other to account, what the are we doing? So there's a very political strand behind all of that, which, and Brecht, I could eat Brecht for breakfast, is another big, love of mine that I used to teach a lot. So the inspiration is that I don't mind if I'm fired from anything tomorrow, but I have to name in the room what I think is in the room, or help others really discover what that edge is and bring that into the room. So if it's a commedia scenario with the, CTs, for example, there will be things in that, it's not like, oh, I've just run over a rabbit and I need to put it in the story. Well, maybe. But there are other things going on about the relationships with different generations, or, being a woman now, or being a, trans person. These things need to come in and have some license to be shared. And you don't get that in text very often, Chekhov or Shakespeare. It's somebody else's word. So, using this can bring so much more of yourself and your story into the room. And when we started this conversation about Beryl and the Perils, the personal is political, and it's a channel to be sort of followed. Maybe a little bit answer your scramble.
Thank you.
Omelette.
And
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the half masks. I was just wondering when we use the full masks down here.
Well, the neutral mask is not for performance. It's a great tool, as you maybe know, to unlock the body. Because put the neutral mask on and you immediately see, what's going on in the body. So it's a liberator. But it's a tool. The full mask, I just brought these ones because there are masks from all over the world, and there are cultures, whether it's Japan or China or Korea or Africa, that use masks, and they use masks for all sorts of different reasons. But to actually watch a masked piece without half mask or without real people in it can be an extraordinary thing, because after 3 minutes with music, you have to rely on the sound tape really. But they're just, they're transformational. Then people will feel transformed when they put, particularly with the leather masks on, because you can't get very excited by a piece of plastic, as we know. But I just brought these along because I just wanted, I don't use a full mask, but I just know that it exists, and we have to know what else is around, even if we don't really want to touch it very much. And I've got, I'm like in Mexico. When I was in Mexico, I came home with fantastic masks. I've got a chicken and a cat and a rabbit and a goat, and they're full facial masks. And after a time, like 2 minutes, you can't really do anything with them because they're like. Nothing changes. And the eyes, the eyes are the window of the soul, and the mouth is the place that brings sound and breath, and you have to have those, otherwise it's inhuman.
Yeah, I was just going to say, have you heard of Geese Theatre Company?
Yes, I have heard of Geese. Do you know them?
Yeah, they're Birmingham-based in West Midlands, that's where I'm from.
So Sally Brooks, who works for Geese Theatre Company, do you know the Actors Gang?
I did a workshop with them once.
Geese Theatre Company take mask work into prisons. And Sally Brooks, who is one of their mask makers, learnt with Ninian from the guy that Ninian learnt with, and then worked with Ninian. And she's a fantastic mask maker. And the other company that does a lot of work in prisons with Commedia is the Actors Gang, which is a company run in America by Tim Robbins, who's a famous, Hollywood star.
Yeah.
And it is just extraordinary, the work that they do. And they've got this, they're not really allowed to do proper polls, proper research about recidivism and what happens to people once they've left and they've done a term or something of Commedia, and they've brought their stories, imagine that, through and with the Commedia mask to an audience. And the prisoners also work with the guards. They're a community. There's that lovely word again, community. It's communal, together. So Geese Theatre still use a lot of mask work in prison, and the Actors Gang in America. And it is transformational. I mean, that's, it comes back to you said something at the very beginning about transforming or becoming something else. Liberating. And, you come to drama school, or you come and do a workshop, and you think you know, or you hope you know, or you kind of don't want to not know. Well, you can't. You can't go there without being ready to go to the next level, to go in the deep, to make discoveries about yourself, because it holds you as a form to make these discoveries and to be flexible and adaptable in a way that text only can't do.
Yeah.
See, drugs.
Why do you reckon that British culture has such a hard time with mask work then?
Not with mask work so much, but with the names like Pantalone and Il Dottore and Isabella and Silvio and Zani, because they are Italian names, whereas they don't have problems with the ones from pantomime. So, we've got to look for a kind of middle way. I think that for an English audience to go and see, the triumph of Arlecchino is already, well, who's Arlecchino? Whereas the triumph of George or, Derek is suddenly more interesting, maybe. So I that's it.
So any other questions?
Denise.
Also, I just had a discussion with an Italian student today, and she said that commedia in Italian and English sound different. They're quite different because of the musicality of the
Of the
language.
voice. I tell you where it really works for commedia in the UK is Liverpool. The Liverpool accent and the Newcastle accent, they just like, you go, oh wow, that is really something. But yes, they'll sound very different. And I saw a little performance on Saturday with an English company who take stuff to schools. It was just like watching people with a mask on. There was no bringing. They didn't find their new voices. They were using their voices. It's like, anyway, yes. So there's a big difference. But I mean, when I first did this, in Avignon, there were 6 different languages on stage. So there was Danish, Spanish, English, German, and French, and maybe one other. So we were all working in our own languages. So immediately you've got this kind of multiculturalism, which is like the dialects.
Marie?
Yes, you said what you did 40 years ago was radical. So I was wondering, what would today, with or without masks, be radical?
I think that Beryl and the Perils was very radical 40 years ago. I don't think that Beryl and the Perils, the feminist theatre company, what we spoke about then is quite, if we did it on stage now, it's already been done. But in terms of commedia, I don't think I can sort of answer that very easily, because it's already radical and not radical. You can do it with or without mask. I think that there's a company in the UK that does it with whiteface. Is that sort of what you were saying? How is it radical now?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we don't have it on our course because I think our mostly the things it's not, I don't know why, it's not relevant maybe.
Yeah.
So why still commedia in 2020? What's
Because it's fine that you haven't got it on your course, because I'm obviously mad and very radical and anarchic. But I've also discovered the Holy Grail, which for me is commedia. So, you know, I'm a little bit like a Seventh-day Adventist, because I think that it can unlock things that actors need to know and give them their own vocabulary for owning their work as an artist. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen through other ways, with, you know, learning about Stanislavski. It's in there. That happens. You know, actioning, you know, learning maybe some Meisner or, you know, Michael Chekhov. There are other ways, but what's interesting is that this came first. It came first. It's already there.
You had a question, Constantine?
Yes, and I forgot it. I'll come back.
Chiara?
Of course, when you start working with masks, you probably explore all of the masks. Do you think there's ever a point where you sort of decide on one mask that you keep doing when you explore the media?
So you might go, oh, I don't like playing Brigella or the Doctor, but I like Harlequino.
Yes.
Or I like Zani. And then you go, that's what I want to play. So yes, you can then have just the one.
Because there's an energy with each character, and the mask helps release that energy. I know, I'm just jumping on that for a second, because we did a workshop a few years ago, a voice conference, and there was Commedia involved in there, and I remember putting the Arlecchino mask on, and someone just went, God, that's so you. And I went, I hadn't realised that's all bubbling underneath. And,
Yeah.
and absolutely, and that's, again, it's one of those things, you go into something else.
Voila.
And it's quite amazing. It's just, I think it's what the mask gives you in terms of the energy and what you're attracted to in that mask. That brings you to it, maybe. Yeah?
Kira?
It's kind of a two-way question, but do you still discover new things about yourself when you put on the mask, and do you discover new things about the character?
I do. I still discover things about me, and probably about the character too, but I don't tend to play these with other people, so I'm not in a directed piece, and so I'm not in the position to make those discoveries, but my teaching, I hope, is an enabler to other people to make those discoveries and identify them and use them, either to understand the type a little bit more and the behaviour of the type, or to bring themselves to that and go, oh God, I didn't think I could do that. You know, it might be somebody who, you know, because I always ask my students, what's one thing that you want to do better or do differently? And you get things like, I don't want to corpse, I always corpse, or I'm very good at umming, or I feel very tiny. And so my job is to, through these masks, help that person find the next step. It's a sort of evolutionary step, you know, so that they not overcome it, but they go, that's that then. I get it. I'll do that then.
Connor?
It's interesting, obviously, seeing how Commedia has evolved from 16th century Venice to now. And I know that you're no fortune teller or anything like that, but but where do you see Commedia going in 50 or maybe like 100 years' time in terms of its relevance in theatre and whatnot?
Well, the masks may just be saturated, and they won't exist anymore. But if it's an oral tradition that has survived 500 years, it's for a very good reason. And if it's a teacher, and if it's a storyteller, and if it illuminates things about relationships and the way that we as a society live together, and kind of puts things under the microscope, maybe at least it will be doing that. Maybe at least it will be offering people the opportunity to think.
And that is radical, right? That in itself is radical. To make us think about our own lives and how we relate to one another, and what are the conditions of our living. Going back to Marie's question about what is radical about Commedia today,
and how it makes us think about, you said it earlier, oh, there was equal pay, there were women on stage. That was radical, and still today we're struggling with those things, right? So we still live under a kind of patriarchal regime, and we're still fighting for equality, and we are still kind of trying to figure out our conditions of living. So I think that is absolutely necessary and radical. Sorry, I interrupted you.
This wasn't an interruption. Thank you.
Caitlin?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of, we use the word energy a lot there, and back to Natasha's point about more mass coming back and things.
Yeah.
And I can't help but relate it to what we're learning about right now, which is a lot of labbing, or
Laban.
Labbing, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you ever draw correlations between like comedia and labbing? And that, yeah.
And you come on fast, you leave slow. You know, you come on direct, you leave indirect. It's the language of commedia. I don't know if Laban studied a bit of commedia. I'm just going to nick that. But no, Laban and commedia, they're like that. Like Laban, like commedia and actions, or commedia and Brecht, or commedia and Stanislavski. What came first? So then you go, well, that's quite interesting that those elements of it have survived and are still alive with us. So yes, Laban.
We'll take a couple more questions.
There's 3 hands
Yes,
up.
exactly. Brad, Alistair, and Ben. We'll do that, and then we will finish. Okay? Yes.
When you talk about the practice in finding which kind of character someone would be suited to in finding who they are inside, if they don't necessarily know ways of activating, finding what they are, how do you get into that?
By doing a lot of physical body work first to wake up. So first of all, you have to wake up the body. Every bit of you has to be moving. Has to be alive. At your little toes, you have to feel it. You have to see your energy in your fingers. So the work around the body means that you lead with your 4th toe, or you know that that's you're working or walking with that, or the left thigh is the leader at the moment. You work with that so that the body has transpassed. Is that a word? Transpassed. Its own limitations. We do a warm up and do some acrobatics and ready for work. No, your body's not ready for work. Your body's ready for work when you've gone into a zone where you're going, I don't know if it's 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock now, and I am in another zone. And that's when you start working with the mask. So in a sense, you can't go, well, I rather fancy that mask. Oh, I'll look in the mirror with this mask, and that's what I want to show. It's all from the inside, it's all discovery, it's all exploration. And you will find a mask that suits you more than maybe another. And then I go, how does that feel? Oh, look at that. And we'd all go, because it's all about the audience, look at, what's your name?
Brad.
Look at Brad. Does he look great in that mask? Oh, look at him. Oh, that's absolutely it. Like when the person put the Arlecchino mask on. So you do a lot of work first. A lot of work on the body and the voice first. And the elements, fire, water, those things. Because you have to get out here. It doesn't make sense. You are working with creativity and imagination. You have to have the fire here. The audience has to go, what's going on there? And the imagination and creativity, which has come from you being out of body, takes your audience up there, and that's the dialogue. That's the dialogue. That's the line, but that's the space that you're asking them to go to.
I'm so glad I just want to interrupt.
Yeah, you.
Because I'm so glad you said that, because as the first year, one of the things that we do when we're doing voice is a very thorough physical warm-up in order to get them to a point where they're sweating and out of breath, so they are hot to come into working on voice. So the body is completely open. The body is active, not passive. That energy is ready to go. Thank you. So thank you very much. Sue.
Hello. So you touched on the idea of learning techniques to these that you could also learn through like Stanislavski or Meisner. What sort of things do you believe that these are better for in learning as opposed to through the Stanislavski technique or Meisner
Well, just redo things. It's like a comic book. So when you look at a comic book, you know, you've got frames. And in Commedia, the way that you work on stories is that you know what the journey is, and you do it, and this is Brecht. Well, actually, Brecht did it, but this is Commedia. You learn the story in action only. And then you do it in Gromelot, and then you do it maybe with words. What was your question? I was going there, I just got a bit sidetracked.
It's cool, it's cool.
Tell me.
What sort of things do you believe that you can learn better through these comedians?
Yes, well that's it. That the safety net for performance, whether it's with text, because you can use all of these exercises that I use on text as well, but you learn how high the safety net is as a discipline for you as a performer. So you learn. Again. Third time. So the body knows it does this. Whatever happens, somebody might come along, you still know that you're going there, so that you choreographically, you know where you're going. And then breath-wise. Or breath-wise or melody-wise, you know, and then it's the same. So you do everything 3 times, and your body and your muscles and your oral ability and your voice and your emotions and then the words which sit on top are guiding you, even if you change direction or even if you make a different decision. So there's something there that I think is unique to Commedia, that it doesn't involve the brain making very big decisions about, not quite sure what my intention is here. Shall I try tempt or shall I try tease? You know, you can have those thoughts, but it comes from understanding what has to happen in the body and in everybody else's bodies for the action to continue. Just like Stanislavski, really, isn't it?
Last question, Ben.
You've talked a lot about finding yourself in the masks. Is there a psychological link to the characters? No.
Well, I don't know. Is there a psychological link to the characters?
And do you think that could be applied to therapeutic areas, mental health, that sort of thing?
Well, you know, that's a very interesting question. And when you think about what Geese Theatre and the Actors Gang do, then yes, I'm sure. And I've worked with, I did some work with quite a lot of work through the National Theatre in schools. And I worked with a school in southeast London with kids with learning disabilities and physical disabilities, mental, you know, just kids who were not in mainstream theatre. And the captain, which wasn't the phallic captain, by the way, the other captain, you know, there was this lovely boy there, and he was closed. So everything he did was closed. And he watched the masks, and we actually made masks with them as well, and he put the captain mask on, and he went, I'm the captain! I'm the captain! And what had he learnt? That wasn't the only position for his body. And that openness brings a different perspective, a different lens, a different peripheral, a different feeling. Because when you put a shape in the body, the behaviour follows. And I think that is the big thing, that I don't use it in therapeutically, but I think mask can be, because the body is the biggest speaker. You know, the breath, the body, the sound, before words, we sense things differently.
And what an incredible point to end on, the privilege of openness, and to give somebody that privilege through Commedia, the physicality of openness, to learn to be open to this world. How extraordinary, Didi. How extraordinary. I want to say a couple of things and then we'll finish. So the first one is just to remind you what Didi, I guess asked you to do, which is to talk about the elephant in the room because what have you got to lose?
Mm.
And that's in your practice, right? But also as people, in your everyday lives. And also we have to hold ourselves accountable, right? To take responsibility for our own lives and for our own behaviors. And can I just say, this is my favorite talk because it includes all of the things I'm excited by. So, smashing the patriarchy, women